Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Lilly, for the introduction. It was truly a pleasure to work with you over the past summer and year, actually. Thank you all for being here tonight. There was a lot that went into the creation and the structuring of my research project. It looked very different at the end than it did from the beginning. But ultimately, what I was hoping to look at and to study was whether or not for Prime Minister Trudeau's progressive trade agenda, would that bring any substantial difference to the free trade agreements that Canada negotiates, specifically with regards to their labor portions? Or was this more just convenient rhetoric that would actually not impact the laborers who make the goods that we buy? I'm really grateful for Dr. Lilly, who encouraged me to explore this question in a way that was systematic and methodologically rigorous, because you can actually do that in public affairs. And so for this specifically, we adapted the methodology of an academic, Bernard Hoekman, who developed an index to measure the liberalization of a separate agreement. And we basically adapted this model to measure the strength and the quality of free trade labor chapters. So we did an extensive review of the academic literature and of the treaties themselves to determine what actually made labor chapters good. And we found that it was their level of ambition and their level of enforcement that dictated how strong they were. Ambition refers to the content or substance of the provisions, so what countries were actually committing to do. And enforcement refers to the procedures that are in these agreements that ensures that those commitments are actually delivered, or what penalties if they aren't delivered. So rather than arbitrarily deciding what commitments should be considered strong for a country, we used the 7 core principles that were defined by the International Labour Organization in their own 2 major declarations. Our index applies these 7 principles as indicators to score our free trade agreements out of a possible 100, and according to both their level of ambition and their level of enforcement. And so we evaluated and scored all of Canada's free trade labor chapters from 1997 to the most recent NAFTA 2.0 or USMCA, and the graph over to the side shows our results. Despite some dips, overall, our agreements have actually grown in both their ambition and their enforcement over time. Canada has actually been very successful in committing developing countries and countries that have some pretty not so good labor records to very strong enforcements. Very notably Honduras and Colombia on that chart. However, our highest scores are for our most recent agreements, the TPP and the USMCA. The TPP negotiated by the previous government, and the USMCA negotiated by the current government and under the PTA. And this highlights again the fact that strong labor provisions have actually continue to be a priority for Canadian negotiators before the PTA. But it also does prove a win for Trudeau. He was able to negotiate a pretty progressive chapter with a president that many people would not deem progressive. But I think this also begs the question that if these chapters are our most progressive agreements, if they are the ones with the highest scores, then maybe the progressive and progressive trade agenda was never actually meant to be that progressive and never actually meant to be that new. And this is because many labor advocates have actually stated that Canada's labor chapters, even though they are among the strongest, do not nearly do enough to protect laborers. While these concerns are beyond the scope of this research, we didn't even really get to touch how these chapters are actually implemented, which is a whole nother ballgame. They are definitely important in assessing the impact of our labor chapters on the countries and the workers that we negotiate with. I'm very excited that I do continue to have the chance to work with Dr. Lilly and to explore more of these questions in my master's program at the Norman Paterson School of International Affairs. And I'm also very excited to say that this piece of work is currently being turned into a co-authored manuscript with Dr. Lilly to be submitted for review and publication this fall. Undertaking this study has allowed me to gain a whole bunch of experience in trade policy and trade law, as well as in quantitative analysis, again, that you can do in public affairs through the creation of this index. And these are valuable skills that I am very much looking forward to using in my current degree and hopefully in a future career in international trade policy. I'd like to again thank the Faculty of Public Affairs for this amazing opportunity.